This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. When the Quad Cortex kind of first launched, one of the criticisms that I saw quite a lot of around it, and particularly in people like Paul David's or Rhett's videos and some other people, and this has sort of been echoed, I think, in the user base, was that it was potentially lacking in the effects department. I sort of have a bit of a different opinion on this, and so I wanted to kind of look at this and think about, could this replace, in general, a full kind of pedal board of effects? And I'm pretty sure there's going to be some people watching this video that are going to be like, yeah, of course, I've done it. So leave a comment below if you're one of those people. One of the key factors in this is that you've got the capture capability. So if you've got your favorite drive pedals that you use, it does do a pretty good job of most drive pedals. It even can do some elements of fuzz pedals. It kind of captures some part of the flavor, doesn't necessarily do like the spitty thing or the attack of it. And equally with like tube screamers or things with a clean through, it doesn't necessarily do an amazing job of that, but I think it probably do a good enough job that you could think, yeah, that sounds roughly like my pedal. The first kind of thing to think about, I guess, would be the drives, and I think there's a good range of drive pedals in there. You've got Boss blues drivers, you've got Marshall blues breakers, Marshall governors, you've got, you know, the Friedman BEOD, you've got Avemuram January. Things that it's slightly lacking in, I would say, would be in the fuzz department. So you've got, I think, a fuzz face, and you've got also the big muff, and then there's one other fuzz in there. So I think 3 fuzzes total in the unit. If you're really into fuzzes and the intricacies of fuzz, then maybe you wouldn't even be happy with modeled fuzz anyway. But I think that might be, if you're a fuzz guy, that might have to stay on your pedal board, because I'm not sure that you'd get totally what you want out of the Quad Cortex in terms of fuzz. I think that would be one area which is fair to say is maybe slightly lacking. But drives in general, there's a good range of boosts, good range of like kind of classic effects, you know, Boss OD1, Boss SD1, all the main sorts of things that you want, I think. Let me know in the comments again if it's missing anything specific that you want. But the other thing is that the capture can be used to kind of fill those gaps if you need to. So that's kind of the beauty of the capture thing, right? The delays I would categorize as kind of functional. What you've got in there, you've got your simple delay, you've got your stereo simple delay, you've got a ping pong, you've got a tape delay, you've got an analog delay. Functional delays is what I'd kind of call it. There's no real character delays, you know, so things like reverse effects or maybe some more kind of interesting effects that, or delays that turn into smeared repeats, you know, or with diffused repeats. There's nothing like that in there at the moment. So I would put it in the sort of functional category. So if you're a person who's really into delay or really into lots of kind of posh, expensive delays, if you've got a Strymon timeline, I don't think this would knock that off your board, to be honest. But what it does have there is enough to, I think, get you through most kind of gigs. Again, there's no kind of pitch delays or anything like that, but you could kind of use the Quad Cortex to build your own sorts of delays, and I'll probably show you how I might do some of that now, because you could do something cool with it. So what I mean, let's go chuck in some delays. So say you had a simple delay in mono, could move this down to here, and what we're going to do, split this off here so that we're only affecting the stuff on this chain down here. So then we'd have our got a delay, right? So keep the mix at 100. What we could do is put pitch effects on here. So pitch. So let's try maybe the mini voicer. This could do. Let's try in C major. So we could do some interesting delay effects. We're kind of designing our own. You could do something like that. That's not poly though, is it? So let's go with something poly. So pitch shifter. This could work. Then we could set this up to go up sort of 7 or something. So that has kind of a cool effect. If we wanted that to go stereo afterwards, what I would do, where are you? Just a digital delay, done. And what I would do is again set the mix nice and high, and then width 100. And what else do we need to do? Where's the sync note? Turn that off. Delay time, keep that low. Then that goes wide stereo. And we could also put kind of reverb on this, couldn't we? We could do like a plate lush thing, keep that high, keep the high frequency damping down. You don't have EQ control on this, but you've got, you know, other EQs that you could use again on this kind of thing. So, for instance, if we started to could do some really cool stuff like that. So I think, yeah, you can create your own effects in quite an interesting way on here. Build your own effects. So I think you could be happy. especially because you've got quite a lot of power to be able to explore some really cool things. So let's just chuck in another reverb. Got another plate here. The reverbs as well, I would put in this kind of functional category where there's not really any kind of crazy character reverbs, but you've got your main basic food groups. You've got rooms, halls, caves, shimmers, well, you know, one of each of these, a couple of plates, and a spring. I don't love the spring reverb, but you've got, again, enough stuff in there that I'd imagine most people will be able to gig with that. But again, if you're a person who's got specific reverb needs, like the Strymon Big Sky or one of these kind of more posh reverb effects, I'm thinking maybe this wouldn't push that off your board either. Just because the level of the reverb's there. What is there, I think, sounds pretty decent, except for the spring, but it's not necessarily going to be doing your more characterful reverbs. The compressors in there have a bit of a tendency towards being rack-based units, so rather than being based on real-world kind of compressor pedals. In theory, you could capture the EQ of a compressor, but because it's time-based compression, you wouldn't be able to replace those missing gaps with captures of your favorite compressors. So I think if you're someone who's out there with like an Origin Effects slide rig or a Carl Martin compressor, some of these things, I think maybe those might stay on your board. If you're using a Boss compressor, good news, you've got one modeled in here, and then there's a few like optical compressors and a few bits and pieces like that. But I think there tends to be a tendency towards kind of rack-based stuff for some reason, not exactly sure why, but that kind of is what it is. The pitch effects I would categorize as pretty decent. You've got poly pitch shifting, which not every modeler had at launch. You've also got the mini voicer, which is kind of a really cool little vocoder type effect. You've got poly octave stuff. If you were doing kind of really specific pitch stuff with like a POG or a harmony octave generator, then I would suggest the Electro Harmonics POG or HOG. This probably wouldn't knock that off your board, but for basic kind of pitch shifting stuff or basic whammy stuff, I think this would probably be good enough, and it's got a bit of variety that could get you through most of those kind of things. Modulation, I would think, was kind of this functional, could get you through a gig type situation. There's quite a few choruses, but you tend to have kind of single rotary, single tremolo, a little bit limited in terms of, you know, some of the more wacky modulation effects. I think like one Univibe. There's not a ton of choice in this area. I'm myself not a modulation geek, so I'd ask you to leave your opinions below on some of those effects, if you think they're up to par, if you think they're lacking. Again, since modulation is kind of time-based, you wouldn't be able to fill those gaps with captures. They've got a freeze effect in here, so if you've got an EHX freeze or a Game Changer Audio Plus pedal, this can do that, which I'm really appreciative of because I use that effect for practice and stuff, and I think it can be really good for enhancing solo guitars. The filters, so things like envelope filters, there's like 3 choices in there. I would say that's kind of not necessarily hugely up to par, although Fractal Audio don't have many kind of built-in straightforward filter modulations. I think Line 6 probably lead the way on this in terms of having Mutrons. They have all sorts of stuff, but there's a few bits and pieces in here that could, again, get you some of those envelope filter quacky sounds, but nothing too wacky. EQ, I'd say, is functional, but also quite good to use because of the graphical representation of it. So you've got a few choices for EQ that are decent. The wah, I guess, is a bit of a limited one. You've got 3 options for wah-wah. Now, you'd probably be happy with that unless you're Kirk Hammett. And there's 1 bass wah. Maybe that's a little bit limited. I'd say the looper in here is the best in the game. The only negative is that you can't really save the loops, but one of the huge positives is that you can put the looper anywhere on the grid, and it doesn't even have to be connected to the grid in that way. You can sort of, it's just listening to everything. I think the looper in this, they've done a really fantastic job of. So those are kind of my thoughts. Like in general, I think for most people, if you're not crazy into modulation, crazy into fuzz, and don't have really specific kind of posh reverb needs or posh delay needs, this could probably do the job. I think there is a way to go before people that are super into Strymon or super into brands like that would be happy. And again, if you're into kind of the more experimental stuff from either Empress or Chase Bliss, I think you're going to be keeping some of those pedals. And likewise with compression, fuzz, some of those pedals I think you'd have to end up probably keeping on your board, unless you make the decision, well, I'm just going to work with what's in here. But I think you could 100%, for most people, get through a gig with the effects that are in here. Let me know again if you've found that you had to keep one pedal or two pedals or three pedals, what your board is with the Quad Cortex. I'd be interested to know that. But you've got kind of the key food groups, I think, that can get you through the gig. So yeah, I don't know, in terms of drive, I think it's super solid. Delays and reverbs, wahs, fuzzes, it's kind of functional, but not really got enough in there to really satisfy an effects junkie, I would suggest. Although you can do kind of cool things to build your own, which I would have done in the intro there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Feel free to like and subscribe. And let me know, yeah, if you've got any other ideas for kind of Quad Cortex videos, any tones that you want me to try and dial in, I can have a go at that, or captures to make, let me know. Cheers.